In the spring of 1811, the city of Richmond, Virginia, was forever scarred by a discovery made by workers demolishing an old tobacco warehouse. As they pried up the rotting floorboards, their tools struck something solid and unexpected hidden beneath the worn timber. Clearing away the debris, they found 8 identical wooden boxes, each a small, unadorned casket for a chilling secret. Inside each box lay a single man's wedding ring and a small glass vial filled with a fine, mysterious powder that appeared to be some form of medicinal concoction. The rings were inscribed with different names and dates, marking them as belonging to separate individuals from different times, yet they all shared one unifying and deeply unsettling detail. Each ring had once been placed on the finger of a husband of Ruth Holloway, a woman who had, against all odds, outlived 8 wealthy men over the course of 3 decades. When authorities investigated the vials, their contents would challenge and ultimately shatter everything they thought they knew about the refined, gracious widow who had once been celebrated as the toast of Virginia's high society. The local magistrate, fearing scandal, immediately ordered the entire discovery sealed from the public record, citing matters of a most delicate nature that could irrevocably damage the reputations of prominent families. For over 2 centuries, the true facts of this case remained buried deep within the restricted archives of the Virginia Historical Society. But now the truth behind one of America's most methodical and terrifying serial killers is finally being brought to light. The tale of Ruth Holloway begins not with murder, but with a profound personal tragedy that would ultimately shape the course of 8 men's lives and seal their gruesome fates. The Virginia of 1780 was a land freshly transformed by revolution, yet still deeply haunted by its violent aftermath. In the fertile tobacco region surrounding Richmond and Petersburg, grand plantations stretched along the banks of the James River, their white-columned mansions standing as monuments to newfound American prosperity. The Revolutionary War had officially ended just 3 years prior, but its psychological scars ran deep through Virginia society. Loyalist properties had been seized and redistributed, creating a new class of wealthy patriots while leaving others destitute. It was into this complex world of shifting fortunes and buried secrets that Ruth Holloway would strategically emerge. Ruth arrived in Richmond in the autumn of 1782, presenting herself as a striking woman of 28 with auburn hair and eyes the color of winter fog. Her story was simple, yet heartbreakingly effective. She claimed to be the widow of a heroic Continental Army officer, Captain Jonathan Holloway, who had allegedly died at the Battle of Yorktown. She explained she had lost everything in the war and sought to start anew in Virginia, drawn by reports of the state's prosperity and the kindness of its people. What made Ruth remarkable was not merely her beauty but her evident intelligence and refinement. She spoke with the cultured accent of an educated gentlewoman, could read Latin, and possessed an extensive knowledge of medicinal herbs and treatments. In an era when professional medical care was primitive and scarce, Ruth's healing abilities quickly made her invaluable to Richmond's elite. She carried a worn, leather-bound journal which she claimed was filled with precious family remedies passed down through generations. The Virginia gentry welcomed Ruth with open arms. The war had created a shortage of eligible women, and here was a refined widow of impeccable manners. Within months, she had established herself in a respectable house on Clay Street, supporting herself by treating ailments ranging from consumption to nervous disorders. But beneath Richmond's polished surface, darker currents flowed. The war had created not just heroes but profiteers and traitors. Whispered conversations spoke of men who had switched sides for British gold, of supply convoys mysteriously ambushed, of patriot leaders betrayed to British forces. Some suspected a secret collaborationist organization, but proof remained elusive. These men had not only survived the war but thrived, their alleged treason rewarded with seized loyalist properties and lucrative government contracts. It was in this atmosphere of prosperity built on potential betrayal that Ruth Holloway began her deadly courtship with Virginia's most prominent citizens. She seemed to possess an uncanny ability to attract the attention of the colony's most successful men: tobacco merchants, shipping magnates, land speculators, and political figures. Each would fall under her spell, marry her with great ceremony, and then die under circumstances that seemed perfectly natural to their contemporaries. The first sign that something was amiss came from an unexpected source: the enslaved African Americans who worked in the great houses where Ruth's husbands lived and died. They whispered among themselves about the strange illnesses that befell their masters after marriage to the widow Holloway, always beginning with stomach pain, progressing to weakness, and ending in death. But in a society where slave testimony carried no legal weight, their observations were dismissed as superstition. The first death occurred on a humid August night in 1783, less than 6 months after Ruth married Colonel Edmund Fairfax, a successful tobacco merchant. Fairfax, a robust man of 45, was found dead in his study by his house servant Jupiter at dawn on August 15th. Jupiter would later tell other slaves what he had witnessed, though his account would never reach white authorities. He had been awakened around midnight by unusual sounds from his master's study, a low moaning followed by the scrape of a chair. Creeping to investigate, he saw his master doubled over his desk, clutching his stomach, while Mrs. Ruth stood beside him, offering a steaming cup of medicinal tea. "Drink this, my dear Edmund," Jupiter heard her say. "It will ease the pain. I prepared it with special care." Colonel Fairfax raised his head with effort, his face ashen. "The pain, it's getting worse, Ruth. Perhaps we should send for Dr. Harrison." Ruth's hand rested firmly on his shoulder. "Nonsense, darling. Dr. Harrison is miles away. This remedy has been used in my family for generations. Trust me." Her voice was soothing, but Jupiter detected a note of insistence that brooked no argument. The colonel drank, and within minutes his moaning intensified. Jupiter watched in horror as his master convulsed, then collapsed forward onto his desk. Ruth stood perfectly still for a long moment, watching. Then, with calm movements, she retrieved the cup, rinsed it thoroughly in a basin she had prepared, and only then began to scream for help. When Dr. Harrison arrived, he found Ruth in a state of convincing grief, clutching her husband's body. The symptoms she described were consistent with acute gastric distress, possibly from tainted food. The colonel had been involved in contentious business dealings, she explained, and had complained of stomach problems recently. Dr. Harrison's examination revealed nothing suspicious. The body showed no signs of violence, and gastric symptoms were common in Virginia. He recorded the cause of death as acute gastric fever. What Dr. Harrison didn't know was that Ruth's medicinal knowledge came from a sinister source. During her journey to Virginia, she had spent weeks in Philadelphia with a disgraced physician named Dr. Marcus Wainwright, who had been expelled for experimenting with plant extracts as means of causing untraceable deaths. Ruth had not only learned his methods but improved upon them. Her journal contained not family remedies but carefully recorded formulas for murder disguised as medicine. The funeral was attended by Richmond's elite. Ruth played the grieving widow to perfection, fainting at the graveside. The colonel's will, drawn up after their marriage, left her a substantial inheritance, but her grief proved short-lived. Within 3 months, she was seen accepting the attentions of Captain William Randolph, a shipping magnate. Those who remarked on the speed of her recovery were reminded that a woman alone needed protection, and Randolph was a man of honor. What none of her admirers suspected was that she had not chosen her targets at random. Each man shared a common secret. They had all been members of a clandestine organization that had provided intelligence to British forces during the war. Colonel Fairfax had been the group's treasurer. Ruth's arrival and calculated romantic conquests were the opening moves in a game of revenge that would claim 8 lives. Captain Randolph's death barely 8 months after his marriage followed a similar pattern. The robust sea captain succumbed to what Dr. Harrison diagnosed as bilious fever after 3 days of stomach pain and weakness. By now, Jupiter had been sold to another household, but the slave community maintained its information network. Word spread about another of Mrs. Ruth's husbands dying of stomach ailments. An enslaved man named Caesar, working in the Randolph household, reported similar observations, his master falling ill after medicinal tea from his wife Ruth's calm demeanor and her insistence that no other doctor be called. Caesar found a small vial hidden behind a loose board, containing a white powder that smelled of almonds and bitter herbs. Showing it to Jupiter at the market, the older slave's face went pale. "Same thing I seen at Colonel Fairfax's house," Jupiter whispered. "Found one just like it. The cook made me throw it in the river." The slaves began keeping their own records, noting that Ruth always prepared medicines personally, kept supplies locked away, and took solitary walks to gather herbs. Meanwhile, Ruth's social position grew stronger with each tragedy. Captain Randolph's will left her wealthier, and her reputation as a devoted wife who had suffered earned her widespread sympathy. Ruth's third husband was Judge Thomas Henley, a prominent politician. They married in June 1785 in a lavish ceremony. Judge Henley survived exactly 7 months, dying in January 1786 during a dinner party with a dozen witnesses. He had been in high spirits until Ruth served him a special digestive tonic. Dr. Harrison, now called for the third time to treat one of Ruth's dying husbands, harbored growing suspicions but lacked evidence. Ruth's behavior remained beyond reproach. She had witnesses, was never alone with him, and the symptoms were consistent with natural causes. Moreover, she was a woman of impeccable reputation. To accuse her without proof would be social suicide. The pattern continued. Husband number 4 was plantation owner George Carrington, dead of acute dyspepsia in 1787. Number 5 was merchant Samuel Bradford, dead of nervous fever in 1788. Number 6 was banker Edward Custis, dead of gastric apoplexy in 1789. Each death made Ruth wealthier and more powerful. Each funeral saw her grief grow more theatrical. Each new marriage brought fresh whispers of coincidence, too remarkable to be natural. After Custis's death, a new pattern emerged. Dr. Marcus Wainwright arrived in Richmond in late 1789, claiming to seek a fresh start. He rented a house on the outskirts and kept to himself. But Caesar, working nearby, noticed Ruth making furtive visits to Wainwright's house at dusk. These were not social calls but business meetings. Wainwright had discovered Ruth's true identity and motives and came seeking profit. He knew what she was doing and wanted a share. Their arrangement was simple. He would provide new poisoning methods and she would pay him a percentage. But Wainwright miscalculated. He assumed Ruth needed his expertise and would tolerate his demands. He failed to understand that her murders were motivated not by greed, but by a desire for justice that would not be compromised. The deaths were building toward a climax. Ruth had identified the remaining members of the treasonous organization, and her list was nearly complete. Only 2 names remained. Dr. Harrison himself, the group's medical contact, and the most prominent target, Governor Edmund Randolph, who had coordinated the operation. The autumn of 1790 brought a complication. Captain Jonathan Hale, a former Continental Army intelligence officer investigating wartime treason cases, arrived in Richmond. Officially, he was settling property disputes. Unofficially, he was tracking rumors of a secret organization. His investigation led him to note that many suspected traitors had died mysteriously in recent years. His military training in recognizing patterns and access to intelligence files made him dangerous. Unlike local authorities, Hale saw connections pointing to a deliberate campaign. Hale's breakthrough came through Dr. Harrison. During a conversation about the unusual number of stomach ailment deaths, the doctor mentioned his unease about the pattern among Ruth's husbands. "It's most peculiar, Jonathan," Harrison confided. "Mrs. Holloway has dreadful luck with husbands, yet she's medically knowledgeable and attentive. If I didn't know better, I'd swear she was trying to save them rather than—" He paused. Hale leaned forward. "Rather than—" "What, doctor?" Harrison shook his head. "Forgive me. It's just that in 30 years I've never seen such a concentrated series of similar deaths. The odds are astronomical. That night, Hale investigated Ruth's background. He found no record of Captain Jonathan Holloway in Continental Army files. No officer by that name had died at Yorktown. Ruth had appeared with a fabricated identity. Meanwhile, Ruth targeted her seventh victim, merchant Prince Alexander Fitzhugh, a wealthy member of the treasonous organization. Fitzhugh had provided British forces with information on American supply convoys, costing Patriot lives. Ruth's courtship followed her pattern, but this time she faced scrutiny. Hale had alerted prominent citizens to his suspicions. When Fitzhugh announced his engagement, friends urged caution. "Alexander, surely you've noticed the pattern," warned tobacco magnate Robert Carter. 7 husbands, 7 mysterious deaths. Even if she is unlucky, such tragedy warrants investigation. Fitzhugh's response revealed Ruth's psychological power. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but suspicions are based on coincidence and gossip. Mrs. Holloway has been examined by physicians and magistrates repeatedly. Are we to condemn her because fate has been cruel?" Unbeknownst to him, Ruth had studied his role through documents stolen from Wainwright's files. Wainwright, trying to blackmail Ruth, had investigated her targets and discovered they were all members of the Covenant of Prosperity, which had coordinated intelligence sharing for post-war advantages. Knowing Wainwright knew about the Covenant, Ruth decided he was too dangerous to live. In February 1791, Wainwright was found dead, apparently from a fatal dose of his own poisons. The investigation concluded suicide. Ruth attended his funeral with solemnity but felt relief. The only person who could connect her to poisons was gone. She was free to complete her work. Unbeknownst to Hale, Randolph had investigated Ruth and learned her true identity and motives. He knew she sought revenge, and he was likely her final target. Instead of fleeing, he decided to confront her, to turn her obsession to his advantage. He believed her desire for revenge could be redirected, her skills used for his ambitions. In his mind, she was a weapon to be controlled. The confrontation came at a private dinner at the governor's mansion in June 1792. Ruth accepted, believing it a romantic overture, but found herself facing a man who knew her. "Mrs. Holloway," Randolph said, or should I say, widow of the British agent, executed in 1779. "Let's speak honestly." Ruth's hand moved toward her poison vial, but she stopped when she saw his amused interest. "I see we understand each other," he continued. "I know about your revenge campaign. You've eliminated 7 of 8 Covenant members, and believe me, the last, but you need me alive. There were 9 members." The revelation stunned Ruth. For over a decade, she believed her list complete. Now there was a 9th target. "Who?" she whispered. "Captain Jonathan Hale," Randolph replied. "The Covenant's intelligence analyst who identified your husband. He's been hunting you out of fear you'd discover his role." Ruth's mission transformed from simple revenge to complex betrayal. Randolph assumed her desire for complete vengeance would make her accept an alliance. Instead, it intensified her determination to eliminate all conspirators, including him. "You propose an alliance," she said. "But what assurance against betrayal?" Randolph smiled. "We each possess destructive information, mutual assured destruction." But Ruth had decided. The conversation revealed Hale's identity and confirmed Randolph's ruthlessness. There would be no alliance, only death. A deadly game ensued over weeks. Ruth appeared to accept Randolph's proposal while preparing to eliminate both him and Hale. Randolph believed he recruited an assassin while planning to eliminate her later. Hale, unaware his identity was known, continued investigating, gathering evidence, including slave testimony. He didn't know both Ruth and Randolph watched him, each planning to use his investigation. The climax began on August 15, 1792, exactly 9 years after Fairfax's death. Ruth invited both men to a private dinner, ostensibly to discuss a beneficial business proposition. Each accepted, believing he held the upper hand. Dinner proceeded with civility, but beneath the surface, tension built. Each knew more than they revealed, waiting to strike. Ruth prepared her most sophisticated poisoning scheme yet, using multiple poisons to create untraceable, seemingly unrelated deaths. For Randolph, a slow-acting compound simulating a heart attack, mixed into special brandy. For Hale, a contact poison on his wineglass causing apoplexy hours later, away from her home. But Randolph arrived, knowing her plans through his informants. He knew of her herb purchases, preparation activities, and journal. As they sat, Ruth noticed Randolph's confidence and Hale's tension, interpreting it as her deception working. Conversation revealed psychological dynamics. Ruth spoke of justice and revenge. Those who betray trust deserve consequences, no matter how much time has passed, she said. Randolph agreed. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Hale, uncomfortable, argued, revenge is destructive. The rule of law exists to prevent individuals taking justice into their own hands. Ruth responded, what happens when the law is corrupted by the guilty? What recourse remains? Hale realized he was a target. The discussion was not abstract, but her explanation for killing him. His hand moved toward his concealed pistol, but Randolph's glance warned him. Gentlemen, Ruth said, rising. Let's move to the library for brandy and honest conversation. As they moved, each knew they were walking into the final confrontation. Ruth positioned herself between them and the door. Randolph noted it, but remained confident. Hale calculated survival odds. The library was prepared. Curtains muffled sound, servants were dismissed, disposal materials ready. Now then, Ruth said, moving to decanters. I promised honesty. Governor, you believe you manipulated me into being your assassin. Captain, you believe you have evidence against me for 8 murders. You are both correct and both wrong about my intentions. She turned, holding 2 brandy glasses. Neither of you will leave alive tonight. Governor, you die as leader of the conspiracy that killed my husband. Captain, you die as the analyst who identified him. Your deaths complete my mission. Randolph's composure cracked. Mrs. Holloway, you underestimate the consequences of killing a governor. My death will be investigated. You can't expect to escape scrutiny. Ruth laughed. I've killed 8 prominent men without suspicion. I have wealth, social standing, and eliminated enemies while being seen as a grieving widow. Why would killing you 2 be any challenge? Hale, his training overcoming shock, lunged to disarm her. Ruth threw brandy in his face, containing an irritant causing blindness and pain. As Hale stumbled back, she drew a small pistol. Randolph tackled her, but she spun with grace, aiming at his chest. I don't think so, Governor. After all these years, I won't let you spoil my triumph. The confrontation revealed Ruth's full transformation. She was a strategist who understood human weaknesses. You want the truth about the covenant? She asked. It wasn't patriotic, but greedy men selling information to the highest bidder, switching sides. You betrayed my husband not because he threatened independence, but because he discovered your treason and tried to blackmail you. You couldn't kill him without risk, so you betrayed him to the Americans, letting patriot justice eliminate your problem while making you seem loyal. Hale, vision clearing, understood. Dear God, you're not seeking justice for loyalists but revenge for corruption. Ruth nodded. Finally, you understand. Jonathan was a British agent, but also my husband and father of my child, lost when I fled. Your conspiracy didn't just kill him, it destroyed my life. You turned me into this weapon. Randolph, desperate, offered, Mrs. Holloway, spare me, and I can give you power. With my connections and your skills, we could control Virginia, influence the government. Think what we could accomplish. Ruth's response revealed her core motivation. Governor, you still don't understand. This was never about power or wealth. It was about love. Love for a man you murdered. Love for a life you destroyed. Love for justice your corrupt system couldn't provide. Power corrupts. Love endures and demands satisfaction. The final moments unfolded with precision. Ruth had orchestrated every detail for deaths to appear as their own actions. The bodies were found the next morning. Randolph had a bullet wound, Hale's pistol in his hand. Hale had chemical burns and a head wound from a shattered decanter. The room showed struggle. Ruth was found bound and gagged in a closet. Released, she collapsed in shock. Dr. Harrison arrived, and her account was convincing. She explained Hale arrived, agitated, accusing Randolph of treason. When Hale produced documents, confrontation escalated. They began shouting. Hale drew his pistol. Randolph tried to take it, and it discharged. Hale was wounded by glass. Then someone shoved me in the closet. I heard fighting, then silence. Harrison's examination supported her. Evidence of struggle, her injuries genuine. Her reputation made it inconceivable she orchestrated violence. The investigation was cursory, with both dead and her plausible story. They concluded, Hale and Randolph killed each other over treason allegations. Documents Hale brought were found burned. Investigators didn't know Ruth had prepared for months. The documents were forgeries. The chemical was designed to look like accidental injury. Her injuries were self-inflicted. With both dead, her mission was complete. She had wealth and security. She withdrew socially, claiming trauma, sold her mansion, and moved to a smaller house with few servants. But she didn't lose her taste for control. She became a behind-the-scenes power broker, using wealth and secrets to influence politics and business. She never remarried, claiming too much loss, but maintained friendships with powerful men. After her death in 1834 at 80, her papers revealed not only the 9 murders, but dozens of other schemes: blackmail, manipulation, ruining competitors. Her journal, in code, showed the covenant revenge was just the beginning. She continued eliminating those she deemed deserving, refining methods to avoid suspicion. Later entries revealed her transformation. I have become something God never intended, but the world made necessary. I am justice without law, retribution without mercy, order without government. I have eliminated those society wouldn't punish, without regret. The journal caused a sensation but posed a problem. Many victims were long dead, others too prominent to scandalize. Authorities sealed it, classifying the case as state security. It remained buried for centuries, studied by historians struck by her methodical crimes and psychological sophistication. Modern experts note she was ahead of her time in undetectable murder techniques. But most disturbing was her success manipulating perception. For 50 years, she was seen as a tragic figure while being a prolific killer. She proved the most dangerous criminals control society from within. Her case remains a lesson in how revenge, pursued with intelligence and patience, can corrupt civilization into monstrosity.